So here we are. LEGO Star Wars, the almost complete saga version 2, featuring all 3 of the main Star Wars trilogies. This is a game that I've had on my wishlist ever since the first reveal. It's a game that I pre-ordered, meaning it has to be as good as Elden Ring, another game I pre-ordered. Or maybe it's more like Cyberpunk, a game I also pre-ordered. Hi, but you can just simply call me Amazon. Today we look at my most anticipated game since Cyberpunk 2077. So let's take a nostalgia trip through the sands of Tatooine, wade through the swamps of Dagobah, and fly through the grand city blocks of Coruscant. I've always been a huge fan of Star Wars, probably for the same reason I'm a fan of Harry Potter, the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the Lord of the Rings. There is so much shit going on, so many stories spanning so many movies. The mere amount of lore is immense, an almost ungodly amount of characters and locations to get to know and love. I remember watching the prequels on VHS over and over at my friend's house. He had gotten them for Christmas, and now I remember watching Star Wars Episode 2, waiting for the Jango Fett scenes. These universes are real, they are huge and they take time to get into. But once you do, you'll be waiting for the next episode of She-Hulk every Sunday night refreshing Disney+. My favorite movie in the Star Wars franchise is, get ready for this absolute hot take, Episode 5. Yeah, I know it's everyone's favorite, but it didn't used to be. I actually thought it was really boring when I was younger. I mean, just look at Episode 2, it has so many cool scenes with that funny dude Jar Jar Binks and the totally awesome sequence in the arena. That's the good stuff right there. So, before I start talking about why Rogue One is the best Star Wars movie released since Episode 3, let's look at the goddamn game this video is named after. LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is almost like any other LEGO game released before it. Sure, it evolves in some minor ways here and there, it adds new features and feels fresh, but it's still a LEGO game. This means that if you hate LEGO games, this game probably isn't for you, unless you're a huge fan of Star Wars. This is a big but. But if you like Star Wars to a degree of knowing all the major in-jokes, memes and obscure but not hidden references, this game might just be worth it for that single reason. This game is absolutely chock full with hidden in plain sight type of jokes. Things that made me go, oh, he said, hello there, but in the wrong movie? Oh my god, that's a reference. It's fan service in the best kind of way, especially in the prequels and original trilogy. This means that this game isn't really spoiled by knowing the end of the movies. Everybody knows the fact that Luke's father is Darth Vader by this point. Instead, the spoilers you'll want to look out for are about the jokes, so as not to ruin your own fun. So, before I get into the review of every movie separately, I'll just explain and look at some of the fundamentals of the game. The combat, the layout of the levels and what you do in terms of puzzles and stuff like that. But I'll also briefly speak on the visuals and audio design. If you've ever played a LEGO game before, you know that combat basically boils down to a single button. The attack button. You either hold it to block or mash it to attack. It's simple and mindless. It's easy. LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga actually innovates on this concept by both remaining easy but also by adding more depth for the people who want that. You'll probably, or maybe not, notice me going from a very familiar spam one button mindlessly type of tactic to a more thoughtful, engaging and to be fair, cooler looking combat style. This is where we come to the combos. This is the biggest new update to the way this game plays. It's also a good update. You can now, instead of mindlessly spamming the attack button or maybe throwing a jump or two, actually play the game. I say this because before you didn't have to. A robot could play the previous game on the same levels as I do. It's literally a single button to both block and attack. And attacks also block. I mean, imagine if you could do that in Dark Souls. So this game expands the combat almost endlessly with 2 more buttons. The long range attack and the other attack button. Often used for special attacks like grenades or force powers if you're one of those religious types. This coupled with the new hack and slash air juggling makes for a whole new combat experience. Not a harder one, you can still just spam attack, but a deeper one if you take the time to indulge in it. I have to admit, I really like this new combat system, but it also leaves me wanting more. It's there, but you don't have to use it. Sure, it's really useful, it speeds up boss fights significantly, being able to lay out a lot of damage in a shorter amount of time. Oh yeah, this game has boss fights. I'll speak about them more later as they come up in the story, but I'll say this. These boss fights are the best part of the game in terms of gameplay. They are not challenging if you don't want them to be, but if you take them semi-seriously, the boss fights will be a lot shorter and you'll look so much cooler. This game also adds new range combat, using a new button. Because of this new feature, another one steps forward. The new camera. LEGO games have always had a fixed camera. It works well, but with the new aiming, this wouldn't have worked. You'd have to awkwardly do 180s with the camera if an enemy was in the foreground. I like the new camera, and I had no problems with it at any time in my playthrough. Back to the weapons. You can now aim your weapon, and if you're using a gun or bow or other projectile weapons, you can now aim at weak spots, meaning headshots are now a thing in LEGO games. This is a bit too weak in my opinion though. Shooting an enemy in the head makes them go into a long and great looking animation, an animation that makes them invincible, making headshots boring after a while. I'll always go for them, they're faster, but I think they should have been even faster. Headshots should probably not be a one-shot kill, but maybe make the animation that plays a random one. A rare animation every 20 or so kills could be the one that's the default right now. A quicker one should be the default, making double headshots more efficient. But that's enough of that. Let's look at the space combat, as it's also something that comes up pretty often. It's also one of the biggest new features added in the game. If you've ever played a game like it, you'll probably know how it works. It's simple and in a vacuum pretty wonky, but the fact that it's a one-off occurrence every few levels makes this not so bad. It's still not great, but it serves as a good break from the other gameplay. The general gameplay of LEGO games haven't changed much for a while, and I have to be frank and say I'm not really the biggest fan. I'll make my way through it to see the cutscenes and the combat. Almost every puzzle in the story follows a simple formula of light exploring, breaking shit, doing a simple puzzle and fighting some people. This is broken up every so often with a larger set piece, a flying combat section or a boss fight. This is repeated over and over until the credits roll. I never got bored, but I also basically didn't do any of the side content. That's a great segue. Let's look at the new side content added. If you're a collector, a player that runs around the map clearing every corner for every single collectible, there are literally hundreds of the game's upgrade points, also called Kyberbricks. About 60 ships and over 300 characters to unlock through side quests and the like. There is so much stuff to collect and complete that I wouldn't dare anyone to collect it all. Maybe not on the same level as the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, but still immense. As I just said, there's now also an upgrade system. A system that feels kind of tacked on and cheap, but still a great add-on. The menus you have to traverse to get to them though are really bad. It might be my old school LEGO game gene kicking in, but not seeing every character on a grid is really disappointing. It felt really great to finally complete a row, or hell, the whole thing. But now they're all behind different tabs in the menu. This is probably better in the long run, but damn, I really like that giant grid. LEGO has never looked dirtier and more imperfect. This somehow also means that LEGO has never looked better. Some places look better than others of course, but overall this game looks great. It features a new dirt and imperfection system, and the interiors of bigger ships and the like are what makes the game what it is. It grounds the game in a way never seen before. It looks like LEGO. It doesn't look like a weird machination of CGI and plastic. It's just played with and used plastic now. I really love this, especially on the insides of ships, where the reflections of LEGO pieces as imperfections show up. But this also puts a lot of the other areas to shame. It's sad to see the grass and all of the non-LEGO textures be so meh. in comparison. Unlike games with similar amounts of detail, this game doesn't have an amazing lighting engine. It feels flat a lot of the time, but at the same time, LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga does have some amazing views and epic vistas that make my wallpaper engine sweat. The animations are what carries a lot of the micro levels of detail, being both charming and smooth. Some of the minor NPCs look pretty bad and lifeless though, but that's almost a given. Every single unlockable character that's not just a copy of someone else of themselves is unique. They have multiple funny, quirky and cool looking idle animations that are always fun to look at. LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga did not have any voice acting. Well, it did, it was just not any language a human could understand. This forced them to tell a very simple, visual story that was perfect for kids who don't understand English. I was one of these kids, and I never had a problem with the mumbling they were doing, but with the Skywalker Saga in front of me, I have to say that I could not be more happy with the voice acting. It's great almost all the time, with some standouts being Palpatine and Obi-Wan Kenobi. I really liked their performances here. One I didn't really like though was Han Solo. I felt there was something major off about it. They also removed the death sounds from Yoda, so you know what? It sucks either way. The music in this game is not a soundtrack I can really critique. It's from the movies, and still as great as it was when it came out. I love this music and they will copyright this channel if I play it. As you can tell by the name of this video, I came into this game with a bit of a goal. What Star Wars movie translates into the best LEGO Star Wars game? To get the answer, I'll now, as briefly as possible, go through all of these movies. I won't really talk about the actual movies in themselves unless there is something major missing. Episode 3. So, starting with the Phantom Menace, let's take a look at the first movie I played through. The Phantom Menace was probably my least favorite movie to play in the complete saga. Probably because I've played it the most, but also because of the slow start. This game has that same slow start, but it's more manageable because of the story not being mumbled to you. You can understand and follow it. It's probably also because a lot of the slower parts are just kind of skipped. It's cut down in shorter sections with faster and more engaging gameplay, but not always better. The draw of the older games are their more curated and prolonged levels, focusing on one or two moments in the story. This is most seen in another movie, a movie I will talk about later, but keep this in mind. This movie has its moments though. The end is really good, with the fight with Maul and the destruction of the Trade Federation donut. The pod race is also pretty great, but again, the original saga's pod race is just mechanically better. A pretty great movie, but definitely not the best in the game. Attack of the Clones is really good at times, others being quite literally unplayable, and others just being disappointing. The movie starts pretty great with the Coruscant flying car chase and the Jango Fett boss fight, but as we move on to the second descent planet, things get pretty bad pretty fast. This is where I shit on the Droid Factory. Oh, Droid Factory. First of all, this level is unplayable for me. This might be a problem that is only mine somehow, but it really destroys the entire sequence. Of course it does. It's unplayable. I get less than 20 FPS throughout the short and otherwise fine version of the great level in Complete Saga. This level then leads into another, but this time a disappointing level. The arena is boring now. It used to be one of my favorite levels in the original game because of its scale and just how cool it was. But this is just bad now. It's boring and slow. This, however, leads into one of the game's best boss fights against Dooku. So this obviously isn't the best movie in the game, but I don't know if I'm ready to call it the worst either. There's some really great stuff in there, but then again, it's pretty disappointing in places, others being quite literally unplayable. Revenge of the Sith in the Complete Saga was the undisputed best movie in the game. The challenging but fun dogfight over Coruscant and the exciting crash of the huge ship. Both of these levels are not included in the Skywalker Saga. Both of those levels were in my top 5 of all time in terms of LEGO games. This is disappointing, to say the least. I was really excited to get to run from the elevator again, clearing my way through the huge ship in search of Palpatine. Too bad. The rest of the movie is great though, with a pretty good level on the beach with these super high trees and 3 great boss fights. One of them being probably the greatest in the game. No, it's not the one against Anakin in the end, or the one against Dooku in the beginning, or the one against General Grievous in the middle, but the one against Emperor Palpatine by the end of the middle of the movie. It shows us that the game can both show us some really cool locales and give us some great engaging gameplay. This fight against Palpatine wasn't in the complete saga, so that's one thing this game gets over that one, I guess. Revenge of the Sith turns out to be among the best movies to adapt into a game, but this game didn't have enough time to give us the whole opening act of the movie, which is a bit sad. But then again, this game is at its best when you get to fight a boss or explore its world. This movie has some of the best boss fights, and there are many of them, leading me to place it among the best. So, with the prequels over and done with, we are thrusted into a less civilized time. A time where we don't get to use the lightsaber as much, dealing less damage over time. But we also play more against clones with more health. This is just how these movies work, but it's still a bit of a weird shift. Using lightsabers against droids kills them in 2 or so hits, so not really combo food. But clones have more health, so they are more fun to fight with lightsabers. And we get to do that, just not enough in my opinion. We shoot so much more in the original trilogy that the game feels like an almost completely different one. This harkens back to my issue with the headshots against enemies with helmets that I won't get stuck on again. It's a great movie throughout, with no real bad parts. Except for the part where we fix the Falcon, a section that takes way too much time and functions as a bad round-based defense mode, and the small fact that the trench run is way too fast and dirty. I wish it was more like a boss fight, but alas, a good start for the original trilogy, but not the best in the game. The Empire Strikes Back is the best movie in the series, but does it make for the best game? Well, kind of. The movie starts off great, with a great section of levels, one being a very open section as we search for Luke. There is a pretty great section on Dagobah with some good, if not too simple platforming, and the Cloud City stuff is really good, except when we have to wait and defend Chewbacca as he repairs the Falcon again. This drags on way too long, and with the help of a cannon, this fight is way too easy and mindless. We then come to the boss fight with Darth Vader, being one of the best in the game in my opinion. The last phase is a bit icky, but that level as a whole is definitely in the top 3 in the game, if not even top 1. But, and this is a pretty major but, honestly, there is not enough lightsaber combat. The shooting is, again, a bit too slow. Shooting is just not the best way of doing combat in this game. But don't let this flaw detract from the fact that this chapter in the game is still one of the absolute best. Episode 6 has some great moments, but also a couple of really monotonous ones as well. It starts with the slow and steady introduction to Jabba and all that. This leads into a great boss fight with the Rancor. This boss fight, despite not having a lightsaber, is great. It's pretty long and somehow reminded me of a child-friendly version of Dark Souls. On Jabba's ship, we fight Boba Fett. A fast and easy fight that felt like a chew-in. A couple of seconds later, we're greeted to a really bad boss fight, instead this time against Jabba. The gameplay slows down significantly as we jump on the speeders on the first move of Endor, however. It's as simple as this. The level is too slow. But you're on a speeder bike. Yeah, but the enemies just spawn so slow and you have to eliminate so goddamn many of them. This level would have been a great one if not for this seemingly minor gripe, but it left a sour taste in my mouth. Not nearly as sour as episode 2's Droid Factory, but still bad. A friend of mine had to restart this section of the game 3 times, playing the level in a really awkward way just to get past it. More playtesting would have fixed this problem. The last mission of the movie has us fighting both Darth Vader and Palpatine. It's a great moment, but the fight against Palpatine felt more like a long quicktime event than an actual boss fight. But again, it looks awesome and the moments are great. All in all, the original trilogy is almost always the best in the trilogy. Maybe not in the reference department, but it managed to get me engaged with its gameplay even when I had to use range weapons. The last movie, however, left me wanting more. Its boss fights were both some of the best, like the Rancor, or some of the most disappointing, like in the case of Boba Fett. The sequel trilogy is home to some of the worst movies in the Star Wars franchise. This movie specifically is somehow probably the most boring as a LEGO game though, with parts of it being straight up some of the worst in the game. You start out pretty great with the escape from Jakku as Finn and Poe and the excellent platforming with Rey and BB-8. As we reunite the Falcon with Han Solo, a substantially long level starts. And a great one at that. This starts to fall pretty fast as you get a lightsaber though, leading to one of the least cool boss fights in the game against the traitor dude, which leads into an even worse boss fight with Captain Phasma, which turns out to be a really bad puzzle. The movie then ends on a pretty low note as we fight Kylo Ren, an awkward fight with no nuance because you can't do any cool combos, especially when you fight with a lightsaber as Finn. Man, that guy sucks. The Last Jedi is a lot better in its gameplay than the previous movie, starting out really great with an awesome space sequence. This, however, leads almost directly to a worse part. Looking for a codebreaker feels just as much as a side story as it did in the movie. It doesn't make sense in the scheme of the entire plot. Here it's a pretty long and mostly boring slog through a prison escape. After this though, we are greeted to a slow but well-made section following Luke and Rey. I like this even though it's pretty slow because, well, it's new. It feels fresh and there's a cool puzzle that's admittedly not expanded upon enough, but it's really cool. It does have the fight against Luke Skywalker though, probably one of the worst in the game. Moving on, we're faced with one of my favorite levels in the game, the one where we fight Snoke's guards as both Rey and Kylo. A really cinematic and dynamic fight against multiple enemies. Right after it, we fight Captain Phasma as Finn, and that one girl that I forgot the name of. And it turns out to be a pretty great boss fight, even though we don't have a lightsaber, being more of a puzzle boss fight. The Last Jedi ends on a bit of an L, with a quick time event fight against Kylo Ren as the Ghost Thing version of Luke. All in all, this movie has its ups and downs. Some downs being pretty bad, but The Last Jedi as a whole adds a lot of great moments and some of the game's best boss fights, and some of the worst at the same time. The last movie in the game I played is The Rise of Skywalker. I was going to play the movies in the order they came out, but this is a LEGO game and all the levels came out at the same time, so I started with The Phantom Menace instead. The movie starts out pretty great with 3 superb sections back to back. An exciting escape, a training platform section, and a nice level on Pasana. Unfortunately, the fun ends on Agent Kloss. A boring and forced stealth section with the easiest boss fight ever. It's also one of the longest levels in the game for some odd reason. Right after it, another great section of gameplay starts as we go to the second Death Star ruins. This part looks really good. The epic sight of the giant Lego Death Star is one of the coolest pieces of imagery from the sequel trilogy, and seeing it in the game was great. We puzzle our way through the insides of the wreck, built entirely out of Lego, which looks fantastic by the way, and fight Kylo Ren on our way out of there. This boss is more cinematic than anything, but it's still a great one. The movie ends with a bang as we fight Palpatine's guards and himself right after. A great fight and a really spectacular ending to the game. Maybe not in terms of story, but definitely in terms of spectacle. After taking a closer and more thorough look into the entire game, this video will finally attempt to answer the very hard question, what movie makes the best game? This kind of fails to explain if that means all of the side content, but let's just skip past all that and rank some shit. First of all, what trilogy fares the best? This is almost harder to answer than the first question, mostly because every trilogy has something to like. I really like the prequels because of the amount of melee sword fighting. I really like the original trilogy because of the more focused story and the mostly great boss fights, and the sequels have their own moments, and a great last movie. I have to give it to the prequels here though, if only for the amount of memorable boss fights. I was tempted to put the original trilogy here because of the awful performance and overall bad second movie part of the game, but that's a problem only I seem to have, quite to that degree. I couldn't put the original trilogy here for another reason though. It's the shooting. Sure, the game has great third-person shooting, but the fact is that the combo system is what made the game really fun for me. This means that if I get faced with too much third-person shooting, this game is almost a chore. That's a bit harsh, but I really want to emphasize this. But enough of that. What movie makes the best game? This is a hard question still, even after all of this talking I've been doing. The runners-up are actually spread over all three eras. The Revenge of the Sith, because of its amazing boss fights and overall great levels throughout, but I can't give it to this one because of the opening few levels should have been longer. The battle over Coruscant should have been in there. The second movie to take a hard look at is the last one I played. The Rise of Skywalker was a weird movie to see in the theater. Sure, it gave me some popcorn action and some great fan service, but damn was I disappointed in the end. This is not what happened when I finished the game. Sure, the last couple of movies were shattered in terms of their story and relied almost only on their fanfare, nostalgia baiting and references. But when they were remade in their Lego form, it all came together into a cohesive and beautiful story, and one that almost brought me to tears. Not because of what it had to say, but because it's over. Star Wars will never be what it once was. The Mandalorian has given me some hope, but this game felt final, and that was truly beautiful. But this also isn't it. There was a really bad and generally slow section in the middle of it that I kind of hated. So that's when we loop all the way back to the original trilogy. I'm giving the win to the best movie in the series. A movie that I love and somehow fell in love with again in this game. The Empire Strikes Back is somehow both the best game and the best movie. That last boss with Vader was just too goddamn great. Not as great as Palpatine in the third movie or his guards in the last, but it looks and feels awesome, more than any other. The open section as we try to find Luke is also really cool, and what LEGO games should focus on more. So here we are, the end of the review / whatever this is. Let me just end with this. This is the game I've always wanted, an open world Star Wars game. but it's also the game I dreamed of when I played LEGO Star Wars 1 and 2, separately of course. It's a bigger and better version of the LEGO Star Wars games. I always wanted to fly around in space, explore the different locations and planets, take in the vistas and unlock all the characters. This game is all that. But I'm not the person who wants that anymore. All I can see now is the shallow combat, the frankly bad quests and the wonky performance. I didn't care about all that back in the day, but again, I'm not that person anymore. I care now. I care about the experience and the story, but I'm also a gameplay first kind of guy, and this game just didn't deliver outside of the almost great combat system. The complete saga has better level design. It's not the better game, but as an adult, this is so easy to see. This game didn't focus on level design as much. They wanted the world to feel sort of grounded and realistic, but this hindered its puzzles and their levels. But as a kid, the Skywalker Saga would have wowed me to a degree so high I would probably get a heart attack and die right there and then. But now I can't lie and say I didn't expect more from a game I've wanted to play my entire life. Thanks for watching. This video was created with the help of my patrons. So, thanks for subscribing on there. If you also want to be a part of my videos by voting on the next video or sharing your thoughts and ideas, feel free to subscribe on there. A new poll will be up there soon. Again, thanks for watching.